PodcastOne presents the Steve Austin Show Classics.
All right, everybody, I'm coming to you from Agua Dulce, California, out on location here at the Broken Skull Challenge. We've been filming for 1 week now. We continue rolling cameras tomorrow as we speak. That'll be a Monday. I'm recording this on Sunday, June the 14th. I came out here with all my clothes, all my food. I stay out here on location as we're filming because it makes my day a hell of a lot easier when I don't have to commute 60 miles each way with all the things that I got to do. I'm trying to do the very best I can with this podcast because I take a lot of pride in it. I'm doing a lot of Q&As and stuff over the next few weeks because I don't have time on my schedule to research a whole lot of people and conduct interviews. Kind of postponed breaking down pay-per-views with Wade Keller for the time being because, quite frankly, I don't have time to watch the pay-per-views, to break down the pay-per-views with Wade Keller. So he'll keep doing his thing on Pro Wrestling Torch, and I'll keep doing my thing out here at the Broken Skull Challenge and continue to make some badass television for the people over at Country Music Television. Everything's been going awesome out here. We've had some premier athletes in the first week of filming. We got some badass women coming out here tomorrow, and then we got, another 5-6 weeks of filming to go. So I'm doing the very best I can with this podcast. And I tell you what, it was last week while we were filming, I heard the news on Twitter, and it's funny, man, it ain't funny. But that damn social media, I find out half the news and half the stuff I know from Twitter. And this was bad news. It was the news that the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, had passed away at the age of 69 years of age. My mother went to high school with Dusty way back in the day in Austin, Texas. I believe my mother was probably 2 or 3 years older than Dusty. Maybe she was a junior, senior when he was a freshman. They didn't know each other, but there was just that bond there that, somehow that I'd be attached to Dusty later on down the road. And it ended up being what I chose to do. So my brother, Scott, me, and Kevin were born in Austin. My parents split up. My mom left Austin, went to Victoria, and that's where she met a man named Ken Williams. And my brother Jeff and Jenny were born, and we became a family, and we moved over to Edna, Texas. And my dad was an insurance man. He sold insurance, and my first memories of professional wrestling, I've told this story many times, but it means something special this time because the man in the ring that I gravitated towards was the man named Dusty Rhodes. And what was going on, it was me and my mother, and we were in the living room. Everybody else was sleeping or doing something. My mom was sitting in her chair reading her magazine. I was watching Houston wrestling. It was at the same Houston Coliseum. Dusty Rhodes was wrestling someone in the middle of the ring. It was a smoke-filled arena. Couldn't hardly see no people. One dim light over the ring, and I was hooked. Golly, man, the action that was going on just, it wasn't like today, the fast-moving stuff. The guys are so athletic these days. It was, back then, it was before all the exposés and wrestling was quote-unquote real. At 8 years of age, man, I bought in hook, line, and sinker. So anyway, this man named Dusty Rhodes was on the receiving end of an iron claw, and he was bleeding like a stuck pig. And y'all know how Dusty could bleed. And I always wanted to ask Dusty why he made those vertical gimmicks on his forehead rather than going horizontal. I talked to Dusty on my podcast on the phone a long time ago, and I've always wanted to talk to him in person on the podcast and never got a chance to do that. But, and the podcast wasn't, I love talking to him because I'm such a Dusty fan, but I really wanted to talk to him in person. But anyway, back to the match. Dusty was bleeding in the ring. The heel was getting a ton of heat on him, and they were just stuck right there in the middle. And I wanted to jump through my screen and just beat the hell out of the bad guy that had Dusty in such harm's way. And I remember there's that little security guard just slowly strolling around the Sam Houston Coliseum, and he had a gun on his hip he was carrying. And my mom was reading her magazine, and I told my mother, I said, God dang, Mom. I said, why didn't that security guard do something to help Dusty? And my mom just looked down, put her magazine down. She looked up at the TV, kind of rolled her eyes, and went back to reading her magazine. She didn't get it. Well, she probably did, and she didn't care. She wasn't that big of a pro wrestling fan, but I was. God dang, man. Why didn't that security guard pull that gun on that bad guy and get him off Dusty. That's what I wanted to happen. So anyway, I fell in love with the damn business, and it's just Dusty Rhodes was such a huge impact on my life. And all the years later, when I finally went through high school, went through college, ended up at North Texas State University, working on a freight dock, going to see the Von Erichs fight the Freebirds and all that stuff at the Sportatorium, the world-famous Sportatorium in Dallas, Texas, while I was working at Watkins Motor Lines, and dropped out of college, 17 hours to graduate. And that's when I decided, when I saw that commercial for the Chris Adams Wrestling School, that's when I decided this is what I'm going to do with my life. And it was funny because all during high school, I was a pretty jacked up kid back in the day, kind of ahead of the curve for the little town I was in. Had I been in a big town, I'd just been another scruff because I wasn't that much. But in Edna, I guess I was kind of, pretty cool and pretty good shape. And everybody used to always kind of give me the elbow. Man, you ought to get into pro wrestling. You ought to get into pro wrestling. So I loved it, and I watched it every weekend, and it was always kind of on my mind. And then all these years later, after playing college football and seeing that commercial, that's when I knew that was my calling card. That's what I needed to do with my life. So I enrolled in the Chris Adams School of Professional Wrestling, all because I saw the man Dusty Rhodes on my first, time I came across the business of pro wrestling, and it was him. So, a few 6 months, 8 months later, 9 months later, I guess I was in the Sportatorium, and in comes Dustin Rhodes. And that was the first time I got a chance to meet Dustin. Of course, man, I was a J-Bro. I was a nobody. About 6'2", 252, long blonde hair, just got finished playing ball at North Texas State. And Dustin had already been in the business probably about a year and a half, maybe 2 years, and was a pretty damn good hand. I was watching some speeches and watching Dusty promos, and I watched the Hall of Fame induction. And I remember Dustin saying at the Hall of Fame, and I think it was 2007 when they put Dusty in. I could be wrong. I could stand to be corrected on that. And he said he was always trying to fill his father's shoes and walk in the shoes that his father had walked in, and he never could. And I give Dustin so much credit. That Gold Dust character was so much on fire back in the mid-'90s when I was traveling with him, and they chopped the legs off that gimmick. But Dustin, man, I hope you're proud of your career because you have totally kicked ass, and the work you're doing now is as good as you've ever done. And, Cody's doing so well with Stardust. But anyway, so that was my introduction to Dustin Rhodes. I was going to be introduced to Dusty Rhodes several years later because I started in working for Jerry Jarrett, who had just bought the USWA territory from Fritz Von Erich. And there I was, Steve Williams, just this, somewhat muscular white meat baby face that the heels were coming in there and kicking the hell out of on Friday nights and Saturday mornings. And then finally I started getting a little steam, and I asked Jerry, hey, man, when could I start working full-time? And Jerry said, Steve, I think you're ready now. We'll send you to Memphis in 2 weeks. Hell, 2 weeks later, man, there I am driving to Memphis and fixing to work that weekly territory. Well, y'all have heard me tell this story before, but here's the thing. When you work in the USWA territory, you know that Monday's Memphis, Tuesday's Louisville, Wednesday's Evansville, Thursday's a spot show, Friday is the Sportatorium in Dallas, Texas, Saturday morning is Memphis TV, Saturday night is the Nashville Fairgrounds, Sunday is probably off, unless we had a town booked. So you're working 6 days a week minimum. You're traveling a hell of a lot, and I was starving, but here's the thing. I was working with all these badass guys that had been in the ring anywhere from 8, 10, 15, 20 years. And here I am, this young sponge, this Jay Brown, taking all these notes, riding down the roads with these guys, soaking up knowledge, asking questions, getting taken under the wing by Bronco Lubitsch and Skandar Akbar, traveling down the road with gorgeous Gary Young, and picking the brain of everybody I could work with, working matches with the Nightmare, Danny Davis, veterans, superstars, Bill Dundee, who's drawn a ton of money. And these guys are just giving me all the knowledge. And then Somehow, some way, because Jerry sent me back down to Dallas, Texas, to work a high-profile program of student versus teacher against Chris Adams, where I turned heel, and all of a sudden I was the guy, after 2 months in the business, I knew it all. And because of the positive television exposure, because of the angle of working on top with Chris, and that angle drew a little bit of money, the territory wasn't doing that great at the time, but I won 1990 Pro Wrestling Illustrated Rookie of the Year. I was working for about a year and a half down there in USWA, going back and forth between Nashville, Dallas, and based out of Nashville at the Congress Inn off Dickerson Pike. And it was a rat hole hotel. The people let me pay whenever I had the money, and I always paid. And I certainly wasn't living high on the hog because I didn't know what high on the hog was. And anyway, started traveling down the road with Tom Pritchard, Dr. Tom Pritchard, who was another guy who'd been in the business, a Houston guy who started off in Houston wrestling, who had taught me so much riding up and down the road with that guy. I can't give Dr. Tom Pritchard enough credit for all the 411 he dropped on me and really opened up my eyes to what a character was and et cetera, and psychology. And watching Dr. Tom work on top, where, man, the top guys were bleeding buckets of blood. Tom had an open wound on his forehead. You might as well have just strapped a tampon to it or a maxi pad because, I mean, you could just thump that thing. You wouldn't even have to cut it every night. He could just thump it or just touch it and it'd start bleeding. And these guys were doing everything they could to get people in the house. And I was taking notes, and finally Dr. Tom looks at me and goes, "Hey," he goes, "I got something for you." He says, "I think WCW is interested in you." Hey, man, when you've been down there working for a year and a half and you're starving and you can pull off your pants without unbuttoning them because you've lost that much weight, we used to call it the Nutrisystem territory because everybody that went there lost weight, and that's just the way it was. And so all of a sudden, I said, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, Dusty wants to talk to you." Dusty had the book down in Atlanta, and he was interested in a long-haired kid named Stunning Steve Austin. So, man, sure enough, man, I sent somebody, whether it was Grizzly Smith or somebody, my phone number. I can't remember how the transaction transpired, but anyway, it turns out I'm sitting there talking with Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, on the telephone, and they wanted to fly me into Atlanta for an interview.
You're listening to another classic episode of The Steve Austin Show, only on PodcastOne.
So, man, next thing you know, on one of my days off, I can't even remember how it all happened. I flew into Atlanta and went to the CNN Center. You got to understand, folks, way back in the day, in 1992 or 3, whenever this was, man, I think I'd only been on an airplane 2 or 3 times in my life because I never flown anywhere. Man, I'm just a kid from South Texas. All of a sudden now, I'm walking through an airport, and I can't even remember how I got to the CNN Center. I remember one time, before I get to the story about meeting Dusty, myself and Matt Bourne drove down to Atlanta to Center Stage just to be looked at or see if we could meet anybody. And we sat out in the crowd with the rest of the people and no interest. So all of a sudden now, here's Dusty calling me, and he wants to talk to me because he got some ideas. I'll never forget there, man. I'll never forget it. I walked in that room, I shook the Dream's hand, and he was cool as a cucumber. And y'all know how charismatic Dusty was. Man, the son of a plumber, the common man, and he was. But he was the guy that just oozed charisma, oozed confidence, knowledge, and a guy who was just very sure of himself, and a guy that could make he's the kind of guy, and I don't mean this in any malicious way to someone who can't see, but he'd make a blind man believe he could see. That's how powerful this guy's words were. And so anyway, I go in there, and he didn't know a whole lot about me. He just knew I was a pretty good hand. And I said, yeah. I said, I've been working heel. I've been working with the valet. I'm Stunning Steve Austin. He goes, yeah, Thun and Thief. Yeah, I like that, baby. I like that. Yeah, we'll keep you heel. We'll keep you heel. We'll bring you in. And he gave me the date when they were going to bring me in. And all of a sudden, man, here's the thing. I'll give a little 411 for you. Here's how the wrestling business worked back in the day. When you signed that contract, unless you were somebody special, your standard contract was $75,000 a year. Man, let me tell you something. $75,000 a year is a lot of money, no matter who you are. Right now, $75,000 a year back in '92 was an ass load of money, because I'd been started off making $15 and $20 a night until I'd worked my way up to $100 a night guarantee. $100 a night guarantee is pretty damn good in your early days in the business, but because the territory was down, I only made $100 a night just for about a week or two, and it went back down to being 60, 80, 40, whatever it was. So you can imagine the huge, eye-opening contract that this was for me. And so that meant this, if you stayed for the second year, they automatically bumped you up. Some guys got bumped up to 104. Other guys got bumped up to 156. So if you went past that, then you'd negotiate further down the road. And that's how you kind of, a lot of guys negotiate their own deals. But, here's the thing. First off, I met Dusty, the guy that I grew up idolizing as a kid, the guy that attracted me to the business. Now he's the booker. Now I got a job. All of a sudden, I'm making 75 G's a year. The next year, I was going to make $156. Man, when you come from Edna, Texas, and you've been working on the freight docks, and you've been, just making whatever I was making back then, and all of a sudden now you're going to tell me you're making $156 on the second year? Man, I thought that was just incredible. And it was, at the time, incredible. And I owed it all to Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, for taking a chance on me. Punk-ass kid trying to work my ass off down there in Tennessee and Dallas. And this is the man that gives me a chance. And I ran with it. And as soon as I went in there, I'll be damned if, I took the television title off one of my favorite pro wrestlers of all time. Beautiful Bobby Eaton, one half of one of the greatest tag teams that ever existed, the Midnight Express, led by the unbelievable Jim Cornette. So, man, here I am, TV champ. I'm on a roll. And then I'm thinking, okay, man, things are going good. And they were. And then there was some designs for me to, make a run with Harley Race. And I think as a U.S. champion or whatever was going to happen. And that was when I went to that television taping at one time. I believe it was at Dothan, Alabama. And that's when Brian Pillman told me that we were going to be a tag team from now on, and I wasn't going to get the singles run with Harley Race. And I remember I went to the office. I went to Dusty's little hole-in-the-wall office there in the Dothan, Alabama building we were working at. And I said, hey, Dusty, I said, I thought I was going to get a run with Harley Race as a U.S. champ. He goes, yeah, not now, baby. We're going to use that for down the road. If y'all remember, back in 95, I cut that promo in WCW, and I mentioned, some of those words when Dusty had the book. And I mentioned some of those words when Flair had the book. That was what I was feeling at the time, was frustration that those things never happened for me. But, that's just things happening at the time, and, the guys playing with the cards that they had in their deck and dealing with the roster and the things that they needed to do. So, anyway, had a great little run with Brian, hell of a run as Hollywood Blondes, and then went back to the singles role, and I missed Brian, and then I got the call I got the call that I'd got fired. But Dusty Rhodes was the guy that gave me my break in WCW. And whether I complain later on down the road of what I thought, how I was booked, when I look back at, Eric Bischoff firing me, and, I'd had some injuries, and I was a pretty good mechanic, but I'd never really put the look together. And then I ended up, down there in, ECW, cut some promos, ended up there in the WWF. But I owe a big debt of gratitude to all the guys that came up before me and paid the dues and went up down the road from way, way, way back in the day, and all the guys that poured out buckets of blood and learned how to tell stories and took bumps. And, finally I got a chance to do the same and ride down the road and have a blast, living the greatest job that I've ever had. And I just never would have thought that it would have been the man that attracted me to the business in the first place, the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. And when I look back at Dusty's career I was talking to Court Bauer the other day, just all of the things, the Dustyisms. I mean, the mind that he had for the business, the vision, the tenure, the time that he spent down in Florida under Eddie Graham, the knowledge that he amassed and was able to put together and comprehend, the way he was able to identify with people, and the way that he spoke. When you think about Dusty's promos, the content, the cadence, the pauses, the delivery, whether it was, the rhyming thing or laying down a heavy message. It's funny because, not funny, when you watch that Hard Times video, he makes that match sound like it's the biggest thing that's going on planet Earth. And, he's reaching out, and this is his time to, he wants to win this championship from Flair and in the worst way, and pay the people back for sticking with him for, all the time that he was trying to recover from the injuries that they had imposed on him. And don't let me down now. And it's funny because if you watch that video back, watch the Hard Times video back, he mentions John Wayne. He goes in there with two bad people, and one of them John Wayne, and he dead. So now they won. And I'm bad, and they know I'm bad. When he takes that promo home, as I was talking with Paul Heyman on my podcast about a few weeks ago, and Dusty told Paul, "Where's the money?" Well, here was the money, that whole promo. That promo he does is about 3.5 minutes long, and it's all solid platinum. But Dusty was a huge John Wayne fan, and you watch right there. I'll give you the time code for it later on when I go back to my trailer. But Dusty channels his inner John Wayne as he gives that go-home message to Ric Flair, and he looks at him, and it's that trademark John Wayne look. And I don't think he was trying to be John Wayne. I think that he was just such a John Wayne fan that he channeled that. And I swear that's exactly what it looks like. He just looks over the top of his glasses and goes into that line, just like John Wayne, the Duke, used to pause and give you that bottom line. And, man, it'll send shivers up your spine. But I'm sitting here rambling down here on the course of the Skull Buster, and I can't believe Dusty's gone. All the damn matches he had. Man, when I was a kid, growing up in the mid-'80s, watching the Four Horsemen and those guys, break his leg, his ankle, whatever it was, get all that heat on him, watch Dusty bleed, watch and listen and feel the promos that he cut. Again, I was a fan. I was, at this age, I'm probably, 22, whatever, and I'm still believing it's about half-ass. 90% real, and something's up. But man, Dusty was such a big part of that. And then I think Dusty was one of the first guys that kind of transcended the business. And when you look back, you always said that, like, if you look up professional wrestler in a dictionary, you'll see a Ric Flair there. But Dusty was professional wrestling. He was talking about one of his promos I was watching back in my trailer before I come down here to share some words on him. He was talking about him and Magnum TA, how they was living on that lightning boat. They were both, living pretty fast. And they like fast cars and they like fast times. And that's the way they were living on that edge of that lightning boat to travel through the Earth's plane. And I'm like, man, this guy, he knew what the business was about, and he was laying it down. And I remember riding on that same lightning boat. It was probably a separate lightning boat, but living fast and living the life of a professional wrestler. And when the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, passed away, the contributions that guy gave to the business were about as I don't know what else he could have done to contribute anymore, just from the aspect of promos, from the body of work, the blood, the stories, the reality, the ideas, the creativity. I'm sitting there just rambling. That damn Dusty. There's a match I'm going to turn you guys on to. It's on YouTube, and the match is only about 8 or 9 minutes long. And the match is Dusty and Man with the Hands of Stone, Ron Garvin, with Baby Doll, against Ric Flair and Arn Anderson. And Ric Flair is on fire this entire match. He starts the match off with the Hands of Stone, and the man, Ron's throwing some heavy chops, and Flair busts him open, and Ron busts Flair open on their chest. And I tell you what, Flair was on fire, and so was Dusty, because that's my point. But Flair sets the tone, starting off with Ron, and takes a powder. And when he takes that first powder, he's as serious as a heart attack when he takes his powder. And the crowd is going absolutely crazy. And then he rolls back in there, and he tags in Dusty. And they go through this match, and there's a portion of the match, it's just off the charts. But Dusty does a little thing where they back him into the corner. Arn and Rick have Dusty backed into their corner, have cut him off. They're getting a little heat on him, and all of a sudden, Dusty makes a flurry. Bing, bing, bing. And all of a sudden, he starts into a double jab. Pow, 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 pow. Double jabs, both of them. Then bionic elbows, both of them. Rick takes a bump. Arn takes a bump. Dusty scoots out like a basketball player who made a badass jump shot. And then he goes over, he leans between the second and the third rope, and he kisses Baby Doll, and he goes back across the ring, and he sees Ronnie Garvin there, and so he reaches over and gives Ronnie Garvin a peck on the cheek and plays it off and does that shuffle, and the crowd goes through the damn roof. And I'm sitting there. It's one of those things where you will absolutely get it when you see it. It's nothing but pure-ass, badass pro wrestling, laugh out loud stuff, and just the entertainment factor is off the charts. Later on in the match, Flair gets back in with Dusty, and they do the deal. Flair has opened up a little bit of steam on Dusty. Dusty starts firing up that comeback, and then he starts, that's what it was. Flair jumps Dusty in the corner because he wants to keep the crowd up. Takes Dusty back to the center of the ring. Dusty starts hitting him with that big swinging left jab. Every time Flair takes a bump, then Flair feeds up for the Mac Daddy, and that's that one where Dream does his hands it's like a two circles, like a bicycle thing with his hands. And the guy that he's working with is always mesmerized, and he comes down with that double chop. Flair takes a bump, and the roof blows off the place. And then Flair gets back up and falls back down on his face, and it's nothing but pure magic. I'm going to turn you on to that match. I might just actually go back to the trailer and call that action, but I'm just rambling because I'm not sitting in front of a computer. I'm out on my Kawasaki Mule on the Broken Skull Challenge trying to do a podcast. And I just want to speak about Dusty Rhodes without anything in front of me. I ain't got no paper. I got my Zoom H4n recorder, and I'm just sitting there with a microphone in my hand in the middle of the Skullbuster course. Dusty Rhodes was a legend, and that guy, he doesn't get the credit for being the worker that he was. That dude could work his ass off, and he could work a crowd's ass off, and he can make you want to pay your money for the ticket to see him go get his inside a ring wherever he was at. Dusty Rhodes knew how to sell tickets. Dusty Rhodes was money. And you watch, man, so much of his legend is down south in NWA. Man, I guess it was down in Florida when Eddie Graham sent him up to work with superstar Billy Graham. And the three matches that those guys had and the promos that those guys were cutting was unbelievable magic. So the guy was money wherever he went. And when you go back to when WWF brought him in as the son of a plumber or the guy wearing the polka dots put sapphire with him, and nobody I mean, nobody, I'll have this argument with anybody in the history of pro wrestling, could have pulled off polka dots than Dusty Rhodes and have the run that he had there. But, man, the guy was well-traveled, went all over the world, a world champion, television champion, tag team champion. His legacy will always live on. I will always remember him as being one of my favorites of all time, and he's one of the greatest of all time. Those are my thoughts on Dusty Rhodes, just from my heart and just off the top of my head, and how much the guy meant to me from watching him as a kid, for him giving me an opportunity when I was a year and a half, 2 years in the business, to bring me into one of the big companies, which is WCW, and helping me get my feet in the business. And before I lay off and continue the podcast and go into a break, I'll never forget, we was coming back from somewhere, and me and Dusty, we was on a Southwest Airlines flight. All the boys were on the flight, a bunch of other people on the flight as well. And me and Dusty was on a Southwest flight, and there was only 2 seats on that one side. And Dusty was pretty heavy at the time, and I wasn't no lightweight either. And he was basically damn near sitting on my lap. And I'd been out drinking, and I had a little bit of a hangover, and Dusty was all over me. And we were having a good time, and we were laughing our asses off. Finally, I told him it was damn near a shoot. I said, Dusty, could you please sit in your own seat? I said, because mine is taken. And he started laughing. So anyway, my respects, my thoughts go out to all of the Rhodes family. And Dustin and I traveled down the road with you many, many miles. And Cody, I've gotten to know you here or there on the occasion I get a chance to go to a Monday Night Raw. But I just wish the best for you guys' family. Your dad, I know how much he meant to you guys, how much you guys idolized him and looked up to him. And he was a hell of a man. And I didn't know him well, but what I do know of him as a person was just the ultimate guy. And, you know, he was very instrumental in making the career of a Steve Austin. I'm coming right back after I take a break. The American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, is gone, but he will never be forgotten.
You're listening to another classic episode of The Steve Austin Show, only on PodcastOne.
All right, here we go. I'm out here in Agua Dulce, California. It is hotter than blazes out here. I'm working on the Broken Skull Challenge, as I've told you guys 16 times during the beginning of this podcast and up in the first segment. Man, I needed a little bit of help, and there was heavy news that came down on Thursday, and I wanted to call my buddy Jim Ross over in Norman, Oklahoma. He's in a studio recording his podcast, The Ross Report. Jim, first of all, hello, and so I can go ahead and plug your show. When does your show drop on PodcastOne?
It drops, Steve, on Tuesday nights, 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock p.m. California time every week. I'm doing one show a week, so Tuesday nights it drops, and this week we talk about a lot of stuff with Brian Alvarez, the Wrestling Observer. We'll talk about Dusty. We talk about Money in the Bank, Ring of Honor, TNA, Cain Velasquez, Conor McGregor, Jose Aldo. We got all over the place in the show, so it's a big show, supersized, but Tuesday night. So I appreciate the mention.
Man, you've been doing a lot of stuff WWE related, and I guess you guys probably covered the pay-per-views. I'm out here, and I really hadn't had a chance to watch too much of anything, but I've been hearing your numbers are crushing it, so obviously, you know, the fans are really in tune with watching the shows and keeping in tune with what you have to say, and you giving your, lifetime in the business. It's valuable information, and guys can kind of listen to you, watch storylines, and get kind of where your head's at with what things and how things are going on. So been checking on your numbers, and obviously you're really crushing it and being very successful. Are you still enjoying the podcast process?
Yeah, I'm having a good time. I tell people all the time, you know, if it hadn't been for you, I'd never done it, because sometimes our egos, especially in the wrestling business, where you got to use your ego sometimes to survive and to make it, because everybody don't want you to make it. It's a crazy ass business, but nonetheless, I didn't know what a podcast was, and I didn't want to tell you I didn't know, and I did eventually, but I didn't know what Well, you on this podcast, you'd be good at it. Well, okay, I'll think about it. What I'm thinking is, I don't even know what he's talking about. I don't know what a podcast is. So now I know, and I listen to him, and I listen to your show, and I'm having a blast, and I'm glad I'm doing one a week. I think 2 would wear me down, but I'm having a lot of fun doing one. It lets me plug my projects and my appearances, and I'm going to the UK this weekend to do a couple of Ringside with Jim Ross shows, and I'm doing one Monday in Manchester with Shawn Michaels. So it lets me plug that stuff, and I get to reconnect with people. And it's like today, I'm here doing this.
Right.
And you and I get a chance to shoot the breeze.
Well, let's talk about wrestling. Let's talk about the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, because, man, I always tell everybody, if I'm in my garage doing cardio, back in the old days when I had a DVD player, I was watching mid-'80s NWA and then a little bit of WCW. And to me, growing up, watching that territory along with Mid-South and Power Pro, when you were down there and then when you went to NWA, those were some of the greatest years ever in professional wrestling. And I just kind of went through a little 30-minute talk on the part 1 of my podcast about my memories of Dusty. I was a kid and seen him on the TV. My mom was there in the living room, and Dusty was bleeding real bad, and I wanted the security guard to give him a hand. But Dusty really impacted my life from a young age, and then he gave me my job in WCW. I think he probably had been lobbying for me back in those days too, but Dusty hired me. He flew me down there, but and I appreciate that aspect of Dusty, but I want to just get your take on the man as a performer in the ring, because that guy could work his ass off, and he was a heavy-set dude, but Dusty could do it all. Tremendous fire, great workmanship. Obviously, everybody knows about his promo, but to me, he was one of the first guys to really transcend the business.
He was a pop culture icon. He turned New York on its ear when he would go in there and work with superstar Billy Graham in the Garden. They had never heard a promo guy like him. Their primary babyface in that territory was Bruno. And Bruno's promos were old school and straightforward and believable. Bob Backlund succeeded Bruno. Straightforward, no, he was nothing on the oatmeal, just plain oatmeal for Bob. But then then Dusty would come in. Eddie Graham, being great friends with Vince McMahon, that we know, his father, Eddie was a confidant of his, and he would send Dusty in there. And Dusty would send those promos in or do a promo with Vince. I know in the tribute video that they aired on Dusty, they had a shot in there of Dusty being interviewed by young Vince McMahon back in the day. But nobody in New York had ever heard anything like that. He transcended race. He drew more African American fans than any black wrestler that was ever in Atlanta, for example. That was amazing. Bill Watts brought him down in the mid-'70s when I met him. He brought him in for a big tag team tournament, and he teamed him with Andre. And I'm wondering how in the heck we're going to get out of this deal. It's going to be a double DQ or a disqualification or a count out or something. Well, lo and behold, Watts outsmarted everybody, and he put Dusty and Andre over. Yeah. They became the Mid-South Tag Team champions, and, of course, because of prior contractual obligations, which is logical, they were such big worldwide stars, they couldn't defend the titles in 30 days. So they were declared vacant. And we had to have a tournament to determine the champions. It was just... Yeah. It was such great booking. That's when he met. But Dusty captivated that crowd in the Superdome, and there were a lot of African-American fans there that just embraced him. But the thing about the Dream, and you and I talked about this in the big picture, the best stars I've ever been around since I got in the business in '74 were natural extensions of their own personality, because they didn't have to remember who they were. Right. They were who they were 24/7. They just turn the volume up a little bit or geek it up a little, man. And Dusty was, if you could ride down the street, me and him go to Jimbo's Barbecue in Tampa in his red Ford F-250, it was the same dude that was doing promos.
Right.
He was laughing and cutting up and singing. He thought he could sing. He had a horrible voice. But he'd take a lyric or 4 or 5 words out of a Willie Nelson song, and he would make a promo out of it. He never wrote nothing down. He felt it. Everything was feel. He felt it.
Right.
So that was a difference. He had that gift, man. He had the gift of connecting to his audience, and that everybody, no matter if you're a salesman or a politician, you got everybody in the world wanting to run for president next year. I think there's 11 Republicans already declared they're going to run. All those yahoos want to connect to their audience. They want to reach the constituency. They want to reach the target demographic that's going to vote yay or nay for them. Well, Dusty Rhodes could do that in any territory against any opponent. Was he the best, most polished worker? No. But he'd tell you that. Because he brawled with the best of them, you're damn right. He was great at that. But he could find the formula to reach the audience.
But he worked within, his physical makeup. I mean, and the business was a lot different back then. But he would just if he was just working a leg, I mean, he could just stand there and just twist that foot. But he had the ability to sell. I mean, for a big guy, he sold like it was nobody's business. Right. And he had tremendous fire. I was talking in my first segment, there's a match on YouTube, and you've got to check it out too. But it's Dusty Rhodes and Ron Garvin with Man with the Hands of Stone and Baby Doll against Ric Flair and Arn Anderson. And it's just about a 7-minute match. And Dusty, and Flair was on fire the entire match, but then Dusty, they get him in the corner, start double teaming him, and all of a sudden it's Arn and Rick, and they're double teaming Dusty, and he starts firing back, and all of a sudden he hits 7 double jabs, and then a double atomic elbow drop, and of course both guys bump out. Dusty skirts around the ring, leans between the second and third rope, gives Baby Doll a kiss, and then starts walking by Hands of Stone Ronnie Garvin, and then leans back and gives him a kiss. And the building on the place comes unglued because it was just in the moment. And that wasn't planned. It was just Dusty feeling that crowd. And then, of course, Flair saw what was going on, immediately got back on him and feeds Dusty for a couple of big left jabs. And then I guess it's that snake charmer when he rolls his hands up in the air and brings that double percussion down. And Flair bumped out on that. And I tell you what, that was, a man who knew how to work. He knew how to work the people, and above and beyond that, the spot is so laugh out loud funny in the right way. It's not laugh out loud because it's comedy. It's Dusty Rhodes doing his magic in the ring, and that's what I remember about Dusty Rhodes, maximizing the small things that he did and magnifying the things which were just so unique, entertaining, and original.
And I guarantee you the kiss to Ronnie Garvin was a spur-of-the-moment audible. He just felt it, he knew it would work, and he did it, and it clicked. You can find the same thing on YouTube. I'll give you one to think about it, too, because you're out there doing your Broken Skull Challenge, and at night you're not challenging any broken skulls, but you're getting ready for the next day. Go on YouTube and look up Rhodes and Murdoch tag matches.
Oh, Jesus, yeah.
Now, I'm telling you something, buddy. Now, there's a lot that gets in their longer matches, long meaning 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Where you find the story being told, and you watch how Dusty and Murdoch complimented each other, and on a good night against a great team, and there were a lot of great teams in the AWA where they were. You tell me that you can name me 5 or 6, 8, 4, 3, whatever, better tag teams than Rhodes and Murdoch. I'll challenge you to do that. And I don't care who they are or where they are. They were so much – the Crusher and the Bruiser were unbelievable. But Rhodes and Murdoch were so much better than Dick the Bruiser and the Crusher, who they worked with a bunch and sold out a lot of buildings in Milwaukee and Chicago and Minneapolis and so forth. But Rhodes and Murdoch were absolutely unbelievable until they finally realized that they had probably taken that tag thing as far as they could go, and not unlike Bill Watts telling Bruiser Brody and Stan Hansen, you boys are a great team, but you're going to make a lot more money if you split up. And they didn't like it, so they gave their notice and left. Well, Murdoch and Rhodes figured out, we're going to make more money if we split up, especially the Dream. The Dream knew that he was going to be special. And then when Watts turned him babyface in Florida against Pak Song Nam and Gary Hart, And don't ever let people tell you that Gary Hart was a major influence in Dusty Rhodes being the great babyface in Florida that catapulted him to stardom than he was. It wasn't Paxson and them doing those damn promos.
Right.
It was Gary Hart. And the Cowboy and Eddie Graham orchestrated that turn, and, man, it set that place on fire, and Dusty became that household word. And then when he got on TBS, man, when you got that big platform, there's where the magic started, because then the world got to hear what a lot of us had heard on videotapes or, in our territories.
When was the first time you met Dusty Rhodes in person?
Not long after I got in the business, one of those mid-70s Superdomes. Andre and Rhodes, and I think it was in the late 70s, maybe early 80s at the latest. But Dusty came in the late 70s to be Bill's partner, because Bill was a 300-pound babyface.
Right.
And he had to have, he'd get double or triple teamed and get juiced and all that stuff, and then he'd make a call to the little bully, he called him, the little bully, the son of a plumber. And then Dusty would send in those promos, and half the time he'd be jabbing Bill, because he'd say, Cowboy, the Texas will come and save you. I'll be your partner. So it takes the Texan to save an Okie, but that's all right. We're brothers. You and I being brothers, brother. And watch and say, that son of a, blah, blah, blah. Because he had to get that dig in, that OU Texas.
Yeah, I had to.
So he did it, and they'd come in, and I'll tell you, and it sounded like they were wrestling. You've never seen so many people, Rick.
Yeah.
Robert and Ricky talking, Rock and Roll Express. But they never failed to draw, Steve. They drew money. And Dusty's it wasn't the angles they shot, it was the promos. Then Dusty would come in, he'd every now and then work a Mid-South TV taping, and very seldom on television. Didn't need to be on TV. You just need to hear him. That's all. Didn't need to see him.
What's your fondest memory of Dusty in the ring? Because, you were live there in living color watching so many of his matches.
Oh, God. He never failed to entertain me, man. I called a bunch of Flair matches with Dusty, and they got to be I saw so many of them that they were always special. But Dusty doing things with Tully.
Yeah.
Dusty and Tully was really, really good. Barry Windham and Dusty was really good. Dusty created the War Games. Great. You were in one of them.
Yep.
Maybe more.
War Games 92, 93, whatever it was. Hell of a damn match. I remember that one.
Yeah, and interesting concept. The greatest times I had with him is standing there holding a microphone and watching him go. And all I knew on the format sheet is that we're coming out of a break, and JR, we're going to come to you on camera, and you're going to introduce a dream, and you guys are going to talk about. They give you a subject. You're going to talk about blank, and so you lead him into it, and then you just stand there. Because it wasn't like you memorized, okay, now you memorize your lines,
right.
I'll memorize my lines. None of that, baby. He came out, and I would stand there and mark out, if you could say that.
Yeah, we can.
It don't bother me. I don't look at that as a bad thing. I'm a fan. I got goosebumps. I stood there holding the mic as a guy that was in the business a long time, and had somewhat of a following and an understanding of the business, and I'd be like a small child. He had tingles running up and down. I'd tell him, man, you got me on that one. That was awesome. And he loved that. He loved the accolades.
But it seemingly always had a gift for gab, but obviously, and I was listening to one of his stories on YouTube, and of course I watched the WWE special, a year or two ago, whenever it was. They came out a long time ago, but I'd just seen it. But he was a guy, he said he wrote poetry, and, so he had a way with words. And so obviously JR, seemingly he put a lot of thought into the promo process. Sure, he could just give you, solid gold just if you hit him with something, but, some of the things like that Hard Times promo, and I know that came from his heart, but he spent some time crafting that. And if you watch that promo, Jim, as big of a John Wayne fan as you are, that whole money is promo. But right then, when he kind of calms it down and goes back to ground zero, and it delivers that direct message to Flair, he kind of does his look over his sunglasses, and he kind of cocks his head a little bit, and it was classic John Wayne. You've got to get on YouTube and watch that Hard Times video, because as big of a John Wayne fan as you are, and he mentions him specifically in that promo, and I don't think he was trying to be John Wayne. I just think he was such a fan that it was his inner John Wayne taking over, and it's that come to Jesus look that John Wayne used to give. Do you remember that look? Because if you don't, I want you to go back and watch that video over. I
remember it, but I'm going to watch it again anyway. Look, I talked to him last week. I said, come on, what's wrong, man? He said, I'm good. I'll be around a long time. Jerry Briscoe called me on Thursday or Friday. He said, we talked about Dusty Pass. I said, I just took a picture with him a day or two ago, and he said he'd be around a long time. I equated Dusty's dying to the John Wayne role in The Shootist, where he played a terminally ill gunfighter dying of cancer and knew that he didn't have much time left, and he wanted to die on his birthday. And he went down into this bar, and The Shootist was what it was, and John Wayne went out on his terms. Well, Dusty Rhodes died on John Wayne's birthday, June 11th. And he went out on his terms because he never would admit that he was ill, that there was something wrong. And I guess from what we hear, not official, that he died of kidney failure. But, I love the guy. He was so good to me. He put Tony Schiavone and I together as a team, which was unheard of to have two play-by-play guys on the first Clash of Champions, which was a big deal for Turner at that time. Right. It was going against WrestleMania. And he put two play-by-play guys there because he wanted the stories told. He knew that Flair Sting match was going to go 45 or whatever, and then all the other stuff we had on that show was loaded. He booked, and he wanted us to tell his stories. And he'd say to me, I remember doing the Dr. Death Big Boss Man UWF title change. The match went back to Charlotte. He made Tony Schiavone and David Crockett come in to watch the match because he said, this boy put on a clinic. This is an announcing clinic. And you think that didn't get me some heat?
Yeah.
They didn't want to see my fat butt nowhere. But I had, Dr. Death and his big crowd, and his title is his chance, and he military pressed Big Bubba, and I came out of my chair, and I was stone cold. I was going crazy.
Yeah.
And Dusty loved it. He loved the passion. And he said that on his promo on that book deal. I'm still in the business because I still have the passion. And he still had it till the day that he said adios. And I'm glad that he went the way he did. He got sick one day and died the next. And I think that's exactly. His boy Cody said that they had Willie Nelson playing in the hospital room, and the kids were all around the bed, and he faded right away. Listen to Willie Nelson.
And I tell you what, that was just it was a hard pill to swallow for me, just because, I had so many fond memories of Dusty, and I just, I didn't know that there was anything wrong with him, and all of a sudden, it's so weird, Jim. You and I, we ain't the youngest cats in the world no more, and all of a sudden we get on Twitter, and all of a sudden that's how I get half my news when I'm busy. And so, I sent out a tweet, and I'm like, all of a sudden I get bombarded with, have I heard the news? And so, I had to send out a couple of, text messages to some guys in the business that could confirm, because I guess, it pretty much had just happened, or the word was getting out. But I found out on my damn Twitter account that the man had passed away, and I was like, oh, it really, really caught me at it shocked me, because I didn't know Dusty wasn't doing that well.
I was sitting in Asheville, North Carolina, doing an interview. I was there to work on this charity I'm working on called Headlock on Hunger, which feeds the school-aged children. But I was WWE came down to interview Adam Copeland, Edge, and Beth Phoenix about Owen Hart on this big Owen Hart DVD that WWE's going to do. Really cool DVD. They're interviewing all the family members except his widow and his children, who won't have nothing to do with it. But that's another story for another time. So I'm sitting there, got my phone on vibrate, and this is how it worked. The producer says, "What does May 23rd, 1999 mean to you?" Well, I knew what May 23rd, 1999 was. That's the day Owen Hart died.
Right.
And all of a sudden, it's like my phone became possessed. It buzzed and buzzed and buzzed and wouldn't stop buzzing and buzzing and buzzing. And finally, the cameraman said, "Is that our equipment or JR? Is that your phone?" I said, "That's my phone." And I got out of answering the question right then because I didn't know what to say. I was getting a little tore up. I said, "I got to go to the bathroom." That's what all those old guys can say. When you don't remember something, you just blame it on your age, or you want to get out of something. You say, "I got to go pee."
Yeah.
That's what old guys can do that. Yeah. Nobody says nothing. So I go down to the bathroom, trying to figure out, how I'm going to answer this May 23rd, 1999 question that I'm dodging. I got the limber tail. So I look at my phone, and there I got all these text messages. I got voicemails. I got people calling that Dusty had passed. So it was just, and I just couldn't. I went back in that damn blocking everything, all the emotions, shock mode, trying to block it all out, and it was just it overcame me that night when I got back in my room by myself, and I will tell you, I shed tears. I felt bad that I should have. You always wonder why you didn't have that one more conversation with somebody. But then the next day, when all the media started approaching me, I decided I was going to celebrate his life instead of mourn his death.
Right.
And that's how I kept my sanity. And I said I told him funny stories about him, and But Dusty loved, funny stuff. Dusty loved to fart, and Dusty could fart longer and louder than just about any human being that you ever, other than Andre.
Yeah.
Dusty might have been the greatest farter in the history of wrestling. And he loved to do that and just laugh, and it would be funny to him and all this stuff. And he started teasing Jerry Briscoe because Jerry Briscoe became an ice hockey fan because Tampa Bay made the Stanley Cup. So he started giving Briscoe hell about liking hockey. And, ain't no hockey, he knows anything about hockey. The only thing of hockey is the S word. So, he always turned things into a joke or laughter or whatever. I remember him telling me that Dean Ambrose is James Dean. He changed Dean, J.R. James Dean. This kid's going to be James Dean. Now, if you didn't know who James Dean was, he's calm, he's cool, but he's kind of got a little volatile thing about him.
Right.
You wouldn't get that. Well, okay, I don't even know who the hell James. Some younger generation kid don't even know who James Dean is. They heard the lyric of a song that the Eagles sang.
Right.
But that's it. But he quoted. I remember him telling me about some woman. She's Marilyn Monroe, baby. She's Marilyn Monroe, Joe. You understand how she makes me feel when I get around her. She's Marilyn Monroe. So he always had a story, and but he understood. See, here's the deal. Here's what people say. Well, what does that mean? It meant that he would use terms that I could understand, and he could get his message across to me in that conversation.
Yeah, because his perception and his observation was at a whole nother level, and he could see things in people that were maybe not readily apparent, but he could feel them and anticipate them, and I think that's what he did with a lot of what he did. Common sense, but an uncanny talent and understanding about life in general, but specifically about the psychology, the nuances, the goings on that happen inside a squared circle, the storytelling part and the entertaining part, and about grabbing someone's heart and making them want to shell out that money to buy a ticket. And to me, it's just like I don't know. To me, he was just, again, one of the guys that transcended the business and was a larger-than-life character who was only being himself, which was, indeed, the son of a plumber from Austin, Texas.
Absolutely. I think that I'd like to have a copy of his music. He had his music on his iPad. I don't know if he used that iPad for anything else but to keep music. But if you saw the music that he had on his playlist, it would tell you so much about the man. And he loved music. It's just too damn bad he couldn't sing a lick.
I know, but the business. I mean, half the songs, whether it's Bob Seger or songs that some of these guys were singing. You ride down the road and man, that song's like the business, and I think Dusty got a lot of his ideas and a lot of his inspiration from music. I really do.
Without a doubt, he got it, and he'd hear a lyric or a phrase, whether it be Bob Dylan or Willie Nelson or Waylon Jennings or whomever it may be, the Rolling Stones,
Merle Haggard.
And a black artist, Four Tops. He just had Elvis Presley was a big idol of his. He talked about blue-eyed soul, baby. I got blue-eyed soul. I can't help it. I didn't know it was going to happen, but it happened. So it is what it is. So that was him. That was just a dream, and we loved him, and he was just a lovable character. And I just think he's I still all these days later, I'm still trying to figure out, is he really gone? And but he's left us, but I'll tell you, that's the one thing about the WWE Network that people can say, that you can find him there. You can find his best work, or you can go to YouTube, or you can go. But if you're going to go on YouTube and look for Dusty Rhodes content, you owe it to yourself as a wrestling fan, because I know Steve will. But you owe it to yourself as a wrestling fan. Look at some of those matches with Murdoch and him. They used to keep a donkey in their hotel room, in their apartment in Minneapolis, in a high-rise, just for the hell of it. Because they would tell a great story.
Oh, Jesus.
They just were crazy. But they were quite the team, man. They were.
I'll tell you, I was going through YouTube all last night trying to come up with something to talk about on the show. And I know your time is short, and I'm fixing to wrap this thing up. But I got a chance at couldn't find a whole match. But his first world championship that he won off of Harley Race was done with the crossbody off the top turnbuckle.
Yeah.
And the setup was perfect. Because they had turned into a brawl. Harley was trying to get back into the ring. Well, Dusty was trying to pull Harley out, and then he saw the turnbuckle. He put the pieces together, so he gets up on the turnbuckle. Of course, Harley, being Harley Race, one of the greatest of all time, does. He spins in a direction he doesn't see Dusty, so all of a sudden he must be over here, does the blind feed, and here's a 300-pound man beating the world champion with a cross body, which was not a trademark move by any stretch of the imagination for the American Dream. He gets the 3 count, and the way he jumps up and starts celebrating, just like that tag team match I told you about earlier, and the place, and you just watch the people, the lighting is dim, but they blew the roof off the building because no one saw that coming, especially way back in the day. Heavy-set guy beating Harley Race with a crossbody off the top turnbuckle. It was phenomenal.
I never seen him use that move before or since.
No, but it made sense because it was there and no one expected it. I mean, it was so unlikely. How could he do this?
The other thing, Steve, you watch that again, watch him hit that crossbody and watch Harley get that right leg right where he needed it so Dusty could hook it.
Yeah.
So no matter if Dusty was a little high or a little low, a little left, a little right, Harley got that right leg there so Dusty could make sure and hook the leg, and then Harley kicked out about 3.5 or 3 3/4, if you notice that. But Dusty got the 1, 2, 3. So Harley did the old veteran thing, made sure the leg was hooked, then he kicked out.
But also out of respect, that Dusty was going to hook that leg because he's not going to leave the champ hanging, and he's doing the honors for him that night. So, it was a veteran looking out for himself, but it was also, hey, man, I'm making sure I take care of business here and not disrespect the champ. Right,
yeah, and they had great respect for each other, and it was a great moment, but that was the dream. He made the most simple thing special, and for me, going and eating a barbecue sandwich or talking about music or our annual arguments about the Red River rivalry.
Oh, yeah.
We got into such a cussing match one time that somebody from Stanford was down there, a bean counter, and said, "You guys are way too serious about this football game. and you'd have thought that he was a cheeseburger and we were two hungry wolves because we turned on him. And Dusty told him that this is none of your business. This is personal.
You know, it's funny how people take that serious. They take that Red River Shootout, and you know, here's the thing. I always ride the fence on that issue. And the reason I can do that is because I was born in Austin, Texas, but my mother is from Guthrie, Oklahoma. So that's what gives me the leeway to go either side. But anyway, hey Jim, I'm gonna wrap this thing up. I appreciate you talking to me a little bit about Dusty Rhodes. I wanted to talk to somebody, and you got a chance to see the man up close and in person for so many times. And like I said, the guy gave me a job in WCW. And, you know, but I was a fan from being a kid, and just the impact that he had on me, the impact he had on the business was just tremendous. And I know that I'll never forget him. I'll never forget the entertainment and the joy and sometimes the agony he brought me when those damn horsemen were beating him up and getting the heat on him and how he'd sell. But he, always get his back and get his, make his comeback. But he's a guy that could really turn my gears inside my guts and make me feel for him. And I always wanted to cheer for the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes.
Dusty Rhodes made you feel, it made you hurt, made you laugh, made you cry, did everything. One of the big honors in my life was WWE getting Dusty to say a few things about me in my Hall of Fame package. And that meant an awful lot to me, quite frankly. So I love the guy, and I'm gonna miss him. And I'm gonna think about him. October 12th is his birthday, and that's the day I got married. I've always felt like there was a kinship between he and I. And then when he died on June 11th, the same day John Wayne died, it just come full circle. So we were meant to be together in our careers, and he got me on TBS, and he gave me the ball on national TV, and by God, I was going to run with it, and because I got a shot. And Dusty Rhodes provided that shot on that clash, and I'll never forget it, and I always will remember him fondly every day. He's that kind of guy. And,
folks, the Ross Report drops every Tuesday night on PodcastOne.com and iTunes. You can download it for free just like you can on my podcast. And if you download Jim's podcast, if you hit that subscribe button, you'll never miss a single episode. It'll come to you. And if you want to know what's going on in the world of pro wrestling and the various other people that he talks to, he does great interviews. He's got a hell of a show. I got him in the podcast business, so finally I get a chance to turn the tables on this guy. He always is a guy that he recruited me. He put a word in for me in WCW. He specifically recruited me in WWE. But I can now say that I got Jim Ross in the podcast business, so I finally got a feather in my cap, and I can return the favor. Hey, Jim, I appreciate your time and appreciate you helping a brother out. I got my hands full out here at the Broken Skull Challenge. Mister, it's hot, it's sunny, it's like working in a sandblaster, but we've turned everything up a notch. The athletes are killing it out here this year. I'm having a blast. I'm very busy, but I'm having a blast, and I appreciate you helping me out.
I'll be watching on CMT, and just work on your tan, kid. Work on your tan while you're out there.
Jim, I got so many layers of 70 block, you wouldn't understand it. I'm getting color because you can't help but get color. But that damn, I got so much. I'm going to spend my paychecks on sunblock lotion, and that's what I'm doing. I might go bankrupt, but I gotta protect myself. I'm talking to Jim Ross, and I'm riding off into the sunset. Thank you, Jim.
You bet, buddy.
Thank you for joining us for another classic episode of The Steve Austin Show. Please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts and tell your friends. For more Steve Austin Show, go to PodcastOne.com. That's PodcastOne.com.
Hold on to your jingle bells. Pluto TV has all your holiday favorites for free. Enjoy Christmas classics like Scrooge with Bill Murray or Last Holiday with Queen Latifah. Plus, dive into festive channels like holiday movie favorites by Lifetime or Hallmark movies and more. Download the Pluto TV app on all your favorite devices and start streaming holiday favorites on live channels and on demand. With thousands of free movies and TV shows, Pluto TV is your home for the holidays. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.
Hey everybody, I'm Brian Loans, the lead broadcaster for the NHRA, and now the host of the Hot Rod Pod, Where It All Began by Motor Trend. This will be a new series that'll knock your socks off. We're going to talk to the biggest engine builders, drag racers, competitors, hot rod builders, and more, the movers and shakers of the high-performance aftermarket, both legends past, present, and future, and I'll be joined by a great rotating cast of co-hosts. Whether it's John McGann, the editor of Hot Rod Magazine, whether it's David Freiberger of Roadkill, or a bunch of stars that you know and love from the automotive media, this is a new series that is going to take our show and our brand to the next level. I'm Brian Loans with the Hot Rod Pod, Where It All Began. Make sure you download the Hot Rod Pod wherever you get your podcasts.